Test. Good morning and welcome to Committee of the Whole meeting, June 9th. June 9th. Oh, right. Happy birthday to my son, Colby. I'm sure he's up zooming, watching me right now. And I'd like to welcome everybody else that's Zoom live streaming and anybody that joins us on YouTube later on. Do we have any additions to the agenda? Would anybody care to make an approval of the agenda? Councillor Waxer. All in favor? Pass. Is there any business arising from the May 26th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes? No, that'll lead us into delegations. And I see Tyler Ryopel, Tourism Jasper Executive Director, would like to take a few minutes.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Tyler Riepel. I'm the CEO of Tourism Jasper, and I'm here today on behalf of the four organizations that commission the work that Ben is about to present. Tourism Jasper, the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce, the Jasper Employment Education Center, and Community Futures West Yellowhead. Together, we invested in this project with match support funds from the Government of Alberta through the Northern Regional Economic Development Grant. Following the 2024 wildfire, our organizations recognized the need for a shared, evidence-based understanding of the economic impacts facing Jasper and what would be required to support long-term recovery. While significant work was already underway across the community, we believe that a comprehensive economic assessment could help inform decision-making and identify opportunities to build a stronger and more resilient future. As Jasper moves into its next phase, decisions being made now will help shape not only how our community continues to recover, but how we position ourselves for future prosperity. With this report, our objective is to create a common economic fact base that will help guide decisions and provide a framework for measuring progress in the years ahead. Today, Ben will present findings of the Economic Impact and Opportunities Assessment, including the impacts of the wildfire on Jasper's economy, the challenges facing recovery, and the opportunities to strengthen long-term economic resilience. Following the presentation, we respectfully are asking Council to receive the report and direct administration to work with the project partners and other relevant stakeholders to evaluate its recommendations and return to Council with options for future implementation. Many of the opportunities identified in this assessment align directly with Council's strategic priorities, including economic health, housing, governance and organizational excellence, and financial stewardship. The report was commissioned to help inform decisions, not simply document findings. Its value will ultimately be measured in the actions it inspires and the outcomes it helps achieve for our community. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Ben Brunin, the principal and founder of Virum Consulting. Ben is well known to many in this room through his previous work with Jasper and other Alberta communities, and he brings extensive economic policy, impact analysis, and regional economic development experience.
Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council. Thank you. Okay. All right, well, I'll jump into the presentation. So what I'll provide to you is an overview of the findings of the research that Tyler just described that was commissioned by the funding partners. So the research had three objectives, and you'll see the funding partners are the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce, Tourism Jasper, Community Futures West Yellowhead, and the Jasper Employment and Education Center. And the goal of this work was to assess the pre-fire visitor economy and quantify the economic impacts of the fire on Jasper business, explore the economic potential of a more resilient Jasper business community, and identify strategic actions that align with the destination stewardship plan to help achieve the economic potential of a more resilient Jasper business community. For context, you'll see in this slide the visitor numbers produced by Parks Canada. So in 2023, the visitor counts were comparable to pre-pandemic levels at 2.5 million. So the economy was on a recovery trajectory, recovering from the pandemic. But as you know, in 2024, visitor counts dropped 54%, which is less than the drop, or excuse me, less than the number of visitors from 2020. So a more significant drop than during the pandemic. And while visitor numbers have recovered since then, they're still 14% below pre-fire levels in 2025. And the loss of the amenities and the properties has continued to diminish the visitor activity. So through this research, I prepared this analysis, which shows the trajectory of where Jasper would have been had it not been impacted by the fire, based on the trajectory and the survey information from the Jasper business community. And in 2024, my estimate suggests that the tourism economy would have been valued at approximately 604 million, but it actually, what its value was about 326, so nearly 50% reduction. And then in 2025, the trajectory was 640 million, but in my estimates are at 479 million. So relatively significant disruption, and I don't think a substantial surprise, but it's important to understand just how significant the impact was from the business community. Spending is estimated at much lower than where we would have been. Part of the research approach to really understand the economic impacts and identify solutions involved doing some surveys. And so we did two surveys. Here are the results of the first survey of the business community. And so all I will say is I've really appreciated through this research process the support that I've had from the community, and in part the municipality did and the JRCC did provide me with as much information as possible. One of the sources of information was the ability to survey members of the business registry. So using the business license database of 548 businesses, we commissioned the survey and got a response rate of 73 responses, which is about a 13% response rate. And the responses we got are reflective of the general makeup of the businesses in the community. So it actually turned out to be quite a good and accurate representation of the businesses in the community. And so when we asked them how long it would take for them to fully recover, 58% of respondents indicated greater than 24 months. And at the time of the survey, which occurred late last year in December and early 2026, this would effectively peg that recovery at 3.5 years since the fire. So not an insignificant recovery timeline. 8% of respondents indicated they recover in another 19 to 24 months of the date of the survey, and 5% indicated 13 to 18 months. So still a ways to go from a recovery perspective. And when we asked the businesses what their remaining challenges were to fully recover, to understand some of the priorities that need to inform strategic actions, the number one priority was a lack of visitors to the region. I think that is a pretty logical and notable priority. But in addition, the second priority was a lack of amenities, and then difficulty attracting and retaining employees, and then a lack of staff accommodation, followed by higher operating costs. We did dig into to understand if these priorities were different by type of business, and we did see some interesting differences. So, for example, the retail and restaurant sectors were more likely to indicate a lack of visitors. Higher operating costs were a top factor for the accommodation sector. And a lack of staff accommodation was more of an issue for restaurants, retail, and accommodation. When asked about whether they anticipate higher operating costs since the fire, you'll see here insurance, wages, utilities, lease rates, and other costs such as property taxes and supply costs were all identified by the survey respondents. I don't think it's a big surprise to see insurance be as high as it is. Everyone across the board expects their insurance costs will be higher. But wages and utilities and lease rates were certainly notable. The most concerned with the higher utility rates and the higher interest rates were the private home accommodations. The restaurant, retail, and full service accommodation sectors were most concerned with higher wages, and the retail sector was most concerned with higher lease rates. So when we asked the businesses what measures of support would help accelerate their recovery to previous levels, marketing to attract visitors is top priority, and certainly the work of Tourism Jasper. Operating financial supports and loans were the second priority. Third was provision of staff accommodation, and fourth, infrastructure repair and assistance. Some businesses identified mental health supports and business advisory services as well, but those were lower priorities. The second survey we undertook was a property owner survey. So to understand how property owners affected by the fire are the challenges that they're faced with and the priorities there. We did survey 41 commercial properties that were damaged or destroyed by the fire. We had a total of 30 responses, so a response rate of about 73%. Of the survey respondents, only 70% of them said they planned to rebuild the property. Some said they didn't know. Some said they weren't sure if others would be rebuilding rather than themselves. 46% expect the build to be complete within the next 12 months of the date of the survey, so over by the end of the year. 14% indicated 24 months or are unsure, and 40% indicated it would be between 12 and 24 months, so another 1 to 2 years. And you'll see the report was circulated in the meeting package, so you're able to dig into this. I'm just giving you the high-level overview of everything, but there's a lot of depth to the results, and you can read for yourself some of the findings. This slide packs a fair amount of some of the findings into one succinct graph, and so based off of the survey results and the economic analysis, there are two scenarios, if you will, and two projections of what the economic outlook for Jasper looks to be. So you'll see the orange projection, or the orange line on the graph really at the bottom when you start looking out to 2023. That's the current trajectory. That's the economic forecast for the municipality under where we're at today. If you look at the dashed line, that would be the pre-fire trajectory. So that was the trajectory that the town or the municipality was on from a visitor spending perspective pre-fire. The blue line is the growth trajectory. So this is the trajectory that I forecast if the strategic actions are prioritized and advanced. And then there is that small dotted line that trajects significantly high, and that's more of a reference line, and it's illustrative of the provincial higher ground strategy. So for those of you who are aware, the provincial higher ground strategy has set a goal of increasing tourism expenditures to $25 billion by 2035. And if we were to allocate the proportions of the spend to Jasper, that's what that would look like. That's presented as a reference. I don't anticipate it's a realistic scenario, and it's certainly not one that we're recommending is achievable under the actions, but it is illustrative for your reference. So the goal, based on the recommendations of this report, would be to get to that blue recovery line that takes the economic activity increase from where we're anticipated to go, and effectively getting us back to where we would have been over the next 10 years. And so I mentioned the strategic actions, and part of the research involved conducting interviews with stakeholders in the community. So I interviewed, and you may recall I was here back in November last year and interviewed and had conversations with some of you. I was able to engage with the Recovery Advisory Committee at one of your meetings, and I had one-on-one conversations with a number of stakeholders, notably in the business community and specifically hospitality, recreation, restaurants, transportation, retail, construction, ski industry. So pretty broad swath of the business community. I interviewed individually with all the project partners, and then other stakeholders throughout the community. So some council members, administration, JRCC, and staff at Parks Canada. And based off of the information in the interviews, what I did was I distilled the interview information into strategic actions and framed them in the context of the Jasper Destination Stewardship Plan. And that plan is very important for the partners. We recognize it's very important for the community because it was developed iteratively. It is reflective of the views of the stakeholders that were engaged at the time. And it was recognized by Tourism Jasper, the business community, the municipality, and Parks Canada. And the intent is to align these strategic actions with those themes, and ideally be able to integrate those into the focus of those themes going forward. So the first is place. So, and I will draw from the stewardship plan to help guide some of the framing, but just recognizing stewardship of place is one of the top strategies because such a high percentage of the residents' livelihood depend on its quality. And so in the theme of place, there were sort of three strategic actions. The first was to develop and enhance shoulder and winter season experiences, simply recognizing the need for a build out of the offerings and the amenities and strategically focusing on how can you extend that visitor season. And that's consistent with what was in the original stewardship plan, but I think augmented here as a result of the conversations with the stakeholders. So what I've listed here are the amenities that I heard through and the stakeholders identified are the key opportunities that they think would help enhance and extend the visitor season. Nordic ski offerings, new amenities to support snowshoeing or other events, decathlon skating, new attractions to host events, the ability to attract tournaments, competitions, youth activity, and adventure camps. The idea or the notion of winterizing some of the business properties so they could extend and offer their services to all season capability. And looking at existing access to underutilized attractions, such as an all-season hut system or revisiting the SkyTram constraints. And so the strategic action and all of the strategic actions are to ask the partners, the funders for this research to work collaboratively with the municipality, with Parks Canada, or whoever may be the most relevant here, collaborate to lead and implement an amenity development strategy, focusing on evaluating, ranking, prioritizing these amenity opportunities based on the potential to draw visitors and extend the season, as well as the ability to access private and public financing. At the end of the day, these things have to be financially sustainable, so it is important that they can draw investment from any source. And the framing of how you would rank and prioritize these, because there's so many good ideas, the question becomes, how do you focus them? How do you prioritize them? And how do you work together to achieve them? So that's strategic action one. Strategic action 2 is strengthening accessibility to Jasper. And this was also identified in the original destination stewardship plan and augmented in the discussions today. It is recognizing that Jasper has limitations from its accessibility perspective, particularly relative to other destinations. Generally 4 hours from the major international airports. The Icefields Parkways has some unreliability in the winter season, and whether and to what extent there is the ability to expand air access in the region, whether through Hinton or notably through Hinton. And so the recommendation here is to launch a Jasper access strategy to prioritize enhanced transportation access routes to Jasper and invest in communication upgrades to improve connectivity. The idea being, is there an ability to improve the experience for the visitor in transiting to Jasper? Whether from the Edmonton area, can there be some augmentation of amenities along the route? Is there an ability to increase air access in any way, shape, or form? Or through the parkway? Is there an ability to improve accessibility via access to communications infrastructure? Or can the existing Parks Canada commitment to maintain the road be augmented so that there is more reliability for the visitor in the winter? And the way to explore that is through the recommendation of the strategy, the access strategy. The third priority and strategic action in place is enhancing mobility within the Jasper Park. And so through the conversations, through the interviews with the stakeholders, the stakeholders recognize that Jasper and the municipality has invested in enhancing local transit to help mobilize and manage congestion during peak periods. And there was recognition of those improvements. Respondents, particularly business sector respondents, expressed concern that they'd like to be more meaningfully engaged in the way that transit decisions are arrived at, with a greater focus on ensuring that their business and staff transportation needs are sufficiently prioritized in the design of the system and it's delivered in a cost-effective means. And so the strategic action is to engage in a review of the town's public transportation plan and explore changes that can cost effectively improve mobility for visitors and staff to businesses and attractions in and around town. So the second theme, and there are 4 themes total I'll get through, but the second is people. And interviews identified people as essential for the business recovery and resilience long term. Essentially, in the framing here, as you see in the Jasper Stewardship Plan, I won't read the whole quote, but ultimately, if we take care of Jasper residents, they will take care of visitors. And the stakeholders recognize that as well. So the first priority under the people theme is to develop more housing options for employees and residents. And so businesses provided housing that was lost in the fire, and they also lost the availability of housing stock in the town for their staff accommodation. Even prior to the fire, the availability and adequacy of housing was a factor that many recognized. And we recognize, and the business community recognized, the town clear priority housing, and there's substantial efforts undertaken to rebuild and from a planning densification effort, there's significant effort underway. From the business community perspective, they recognize that the interim housing access for business has improved, but it's not a long-term solution. There were concerns raised about the extent to which private home accommodations take away from long-term housing supply, as well as whether and to what extent they're subsidized from a tax perspective. Notably, whether the tax policy for the business home accommodations actually captures the true business value, and there's concern that there might be an inequity in the tax base. Cooperative housing was also identified, particularly the equity restricted nature of the cooperative housing, just recognizing that they essentially, because they are equity restricted, they pay less taxes than a comparable property in the community, which may create a tax inequity. And so the stakeholders recognize that that's something that could be explored and addressed. And then finally, Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce is exploring an employer-owned housing cooperative as a solution to provide, business staff accommodation. And so the strategic action is that the partners work with municipality to align, and the Parks Canada to align on a collaborative housing strategy that integrates the business housing priorities into the existing housing strategies and ensures equity from a tax treatment, particularly for the cooperatives and the private home accommodations. That one in particular, I think, is probably best addressed as you explore a property tax policy for the municipality. I know that you have had that come to council, and I know that those two issues have been identified. Perhaps to take away from this is a focus on ensuring that property tax policy explores those two issues. The second priority under people is develop the local workforce. And so the labor force composition of the town has evolved substantially since the fire. So the businesses historically relied on temporary foreign worker and immigration programs to meet their seasonal labor needs. This cohort has been substantially displaced since the fire. And then changes to the immigration programs have also substantially changed the ability for businesses to rely on the source of labor. This was a big, significant source of labor, and it's no longer really a reliable source that they can draw upon in the future. And so the strategic action is to work with the partners and the municipality and Parks Canada to advocate for a restoration or rebalancing or restructuring of the immigration and employment policies to better address Jasper's employment needs and develop a targeted regional recruitment pipeline that diversifies hiring approaches and reduces reliance on international recruitment. The strategic focus there. The third of the four themes is prosperity. You'll see the reference here. The Destination Stewardship Plan, the prosperity strategic goal is to improve visitor engagement, to increase revenue opportunities for local business and residents year-round. The prosperity strategic goal is the one goal in the stewardship plan that focuses on driving tourism economic activity. And the central issues that face the business community today have changed and are more focused on prioritizing local recovery and reducing business costs to preserve industry viability and competitiveness. So this is one of the more substantive shifts in terms of priorities relative to the original Destination Stewardship Plan. So the first strategic action is prioritizing local business recovery, balance, and revitalization. So relatively significant mouthful, but businesses are facing significant cost increases. They're facing uncertainty. Well, they might recover. Some don't anticipate whether they will fully recover, and if they do, they won't be doing so too quickly. There's a shift, and I heard this. There is the shift in the business mix and the dynamic of the business of the community pretty substantial. So new investors are investing in Jasper, and the types of businesses are changing and evolving. And there's questions about the experiences offered and what those are going to mean for the town, such as when you have a more integrated offering that potentially reduces visitation at the town, whether we're seeing more international investors, more franchises, fewer local businesses. And with damaged and destroyed businesses building back to a modern standard, what I heard was there is an augmented need for revitalization of existing business properties in the area. There's simply going to be a differential quality with the new builds versus the existing base. In addition, quite clearly, and I don't think this is a new issue for anyone here, but Jasper's constrained with the commercial floor space cap. But recognizing that there is a need for more accommodation, but conversion of underutilized properties is not feasible under the cap. There's simply a constraint there that's not practical to get to what the town from the business community thinks the town needs versus what it currently has. And so the strategic action is to form an economic development agency to convene, coordinate, and lead work on removing barriers to business recovery and providing the intern supports businesses need to rebuild and recover, supporting commercial revitalization, building capacity for business adaptation, because adaptation is something that some businesses are going to need in the face of the evolving nature of the business community. And considering a review of the commercial floor space cap policy to help be a little bit more flexible to allow the rebuild to be more accommodative of what the business community needs to be versus what it is today. Secondly, under prosperity is reducing business cost. So as you saw in the priorities in the survey, rising business costs are a top priority for the business community, whether they be insurance premiums, whether they be lease rates, property taxes, utility fees. And not all businesses are able to absorb this cost equally. Local restaurants, retail shops, smaller hotels, and tourism businesses are more likely to be hurt by these costs. They will face essentially structurally higher costs as a result of coming out of the fire and the new reality that they're faced with. But when they're faced with these costs, they're going to be the ones that are less likely to hire the staff year round or increase wages. Rather than investing in capacity and efficiency, they're more likely to try to cut their costs or roll up their sleeves and work in day-to-day operations. Franchises, multinationals, they have a cost advantage. They can borrow at lower rates. They can access more funding. They have longer timelines. They have more diversity in the types of funding they can access. And so there's this competitive dynamic that's occurring. Ideally, you would see these costs absorbed if businesses can be more profitable year round. So when we talk about extending the visitor season, that's a solution, because the solution is they can generate revenue over the entire season and it's better able to absorb those costs. And that's why it's such a key priority. But on an interim basis, they're still vulnerable, particularly the smaller businesses, the local business. So so the question is what can be done, and you'll see here is a graph of tax rate ratios. I know you're all familiar with tax rate ratios. It's perennial conversation at council, I'm sure. And when I compare a suite of tourism-oriented municipalities on their tax rate ratios, you'll see here Jasper has a higher non-residential to residential tax rate ratio compared to the other tourism communities in BC and Alberta. It's tied for the 5-to-1 ratio with Revelstoke, but it's higher than many others in Western Canada. Perhaps the best comparator is Banff. You're both in the national park. You both have similar distributions of your assessment base. The non-residential assessment shares of your assessment base is about 45% for both Jasper and Banff. That's actually quite high. Most of these other municipalities have a 20% assessment base share for non-residential. And when you look, Banff has a lower non-residential to residential tax rate ratio of 4-to-1, and that's lower than it has been in the past. And so the strategic action is for the partners and the municipality to work to develop a tax policy that, in sort of a broad statement, removes the inequities in the tax base, which speaks to the issues that I've already sort of raised today, and adopts a competitive non-residential to residential tax rate target comparable to other municipalities. And this can be done through the property tax policy that you're currently exploring. And the intent is to benchmark the municipality and set the rates, recognizing, of course, what you hear today from the report, which is the message that the cost increases are top priority for these businesses. And one other point I would make is these are important signals for businesses, for investors, when municipalities make these types of decisions. And while they're impactful locally, they also send the signal about the long-term support for the industry, for the business community going forward. So the final theme is the policy theme. So the policy strategic goal seeks to align public, private sector efforts to better serve the long-term needs of the community. This is an important priority due to the unique relationship and integrated need for the municipality, the business community, and Parks Canada to coordinate their efforts to achieve the vision and objectives of the plan. In tourism communities, the integration is so important. So the first strategic action is a shared vision for the future of Jasper's business community. And this shared vision, through the conversations, through the interviews, it became clear that while there is some alignment on some priorities with the council, with the community stakeholders, with government stakeholders in the business community, there's not full alignment. There's simply not the same level of shared priorities. And businesses are quite clear. They were quite clear in the interviews that their intent is to work with the municipality, and the intent is to work with the community to build trust and to align on what businesses in the community need and how they can be better involved in municipal and community decision making. At the end of the day, perhaps not everybody aligns and sees everything exactly the same, but the ability for the businesses to be more involved, actively involved, and partner more collaboratively with the municipality, community, and governments enhances the process, enhances the decision making, builds the trust, and helps align on strategic action. And so this strategic action is to align on the suite of priorities, actions, accountabilities, and timelines for implementing the goals of the Destination Stewardship Plan, with a commitment to meet regularly, to review progress, address barriers, and reprioritize as needed. Essentially, a commitment to strategic action to implement, align on recommendations, implement, and follow up on them to help advance the priorities and grow the business community, to help it recover and grow over time. Secondly is strengthen provincial relations. So businesses viewed working more collaboratively with the provincial government as a key priority. The Alberta government has prioritized growing tourism spending in the province. They've repositioned Travel Alberta as a destination development and marketing organization. And there's a compelling case for increasing provincial investment in the Jasper tourism industry, particularly in areas that can help facilitate recovery, build the amenities, build the infrastructure to extend the season. And a strategic action is to work to strengthen the partners, to work with municipality, Parks Canada, to strengthen intergovernmental relationships with the province to better enable Jasper to access provincial funding programs and supports. There's an opportunity there, there's a relationship to be built, and there's a benefit that can be realized through this. And finally is monitoring and reporting on progress. One of the priorities that the founders, the funding partners identified, and one of the requests they had of me, was a suite of indicators to help track performance. And as I conducted this research, it became quite clear quite quickly there was not really a lot of indicators that are out there that are tracked on a regular basis relevant to the type of information that the partners were interested in seeing. So, as you can see, we did surveys, did analysis of economic data to come up with, what you see as the conclusions and the insight. But it's difficult. And the ability to identify some key metrics for the municipality that measure the vibrancy, the health, the viability of the business community and the tourism industry will help measure and track the extent and health of the business community and the extent to which it is recovering and growing. And so this strategic action is to collect and report on community priority data through, my suggestion is an annual survey, businesses, residents, and visitors. And this can be done. It takes some effort. It can be done relatively efficiently, but it does take the effort. The Chamber of Commerce has access to the business. You have access to the business. The visitation counts are tracked by Parks Canada. And you can do an annual survey of the residents if you're so inclined. Key metrics would be staff housing needs, labor force requirements and demographics, rental rates by housing type, wage rates by sector, employment, unemployment rates. Those aren't even tracked on a regular basis, which to me was surprising. I'm sure it's surprising to you as well, given the depth of the labor force survey information that's out there for other communities. Business priorities and outlook, visitor sentiment, and visitor counts and expenditures. So that concludes the summary in my presentation of the findings today. There are some appendix slides I won't get into. They're useful for reference. And if you want to get into the data a little bit more, I can do that. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to present today. And I'm happy to engage in a discussion and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brunin, for the refreshing, non-biased new perspective that you brought forward, and you put it all on the table, which is great, really, to hear all at once. It is a lot, but I thank you, and I'll look to council for any questions they may have. Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Councillor, and through you to Mr. Brunin. Starting with the graphs, starting with your graphs, it appears to me that the angle of the economic impacts of the wildfire, and especially when you consider there's going to be a couple more hotels and campgrounds that come on in the next year, is going to meet what the previous line that shows what would happen if there wasn't a fire fairly soon, I think in 27 or 28. And so if we just continue without doing anything, do you expect us to kind of merge there, or you don't think it's ever going to get to there that quickly?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Slide 10 actually is the best slide for this reference, just because it's got the long-term view on it. I don't see it recovering to where the pre-fire trajectory was, simply because a disruption like that simply shifts your economic recovery down compared to where you were. So that line, that's the dashed line, that's growing from where it would have been continually. So I think maybe the key takeaway is, under the current trajectory, you're growing and you're recovering back from the fire, but getting back up to the trajectory you were on won't happen unless there's some concerted effort to shift that curve upward to grow the economy. So that's why you see it that way.
I'm not sure I understand that. I mean, if you have the same number of visitors in a couple of years as you had before the fire, why would not the economic impact be the same?
Because you lost the visitors you would have gotten over the fire. So if you think about it in the context of the trajectory of where you were going, you would have been on a 2%, 3%, 4% growth rate year over year, 2023, 2024, 2025, and up. For a recovery under the current trajectory, because you just won't have access to that economic loss, you're starting from a lower baseline and you're going to recover. So imagine your trajectory now would be on the same trajectory as pre-fire, except the graph simply shifts down because the economic activity has lost over that period of time where the fire occurred. So the growth rates are comparable, but then the other thing is the growth rates aren't the same, because as you'll see in the survey, the business costs are higher, and those are structural costs that they're faced with. Labor is a major cost that they're now going to probably incur a higher cost on than they were previously. Their insurance, their general and administrative costs for this industry are also going up. So whether it's wage rates, whether it's lease rates, whether it's utility rates, whether it's property taxes, all of those are higher now. And because those are all higher, the economic offerings won't be as rich as they would have been under the previous trajectory. So that's also contributing to the fact that they're on a lower trajectory. So those two attributes are largely why you see the curves not merge.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have is about the tax ratios. And when I look at the towns that you've got on there, Jasper is much more of a tourist town than any of them except for Banff, I would say. And Banff, it's difficult to compare because their volume of business is so much higher. So I'm not sure that that's a great comparison. And the second part of the question is, of course, if you change the tax ratios, then of course, where does the money come from? It has to come from the householders. Mm-hmm. And we're not sure, if that's something that's acceptable or not here.
That's a good question. So let me just find that. That's slide 22. Sorry, I've got two computers. For the comparators, there's never a perfect comparator for any municipality. Every municipality has some unique attributes to it that preclude it from identifying that exact other municipality that says, yes, this one looks like us, let's do what they're doing. This is for illustrative purposes. And the intent here is to demonstrate where Jasper sits relative to municipalities that do have a tourism activity. And so, like I said, they're not the same, but Revelstoke, Radium, Fernie, Golden, Invermere are all designated as resort municipalities in British Columbia. So they're actually, if you're going to be a tourist community, these are the ones to look at. I did suggest that Jasper's probably best compared to Banff, and you don't see these slides. I didn't have enough slides, but you'll see it in the report. And I have a slide here. I can send it to you. When you look at the assessment base, and so the assessment share is important because it helps you understand, because your tax rate ratio is one thing, but the share of the assessment that's residential and non-residential is another thing that help kind of influence, because tax rate ratios aren't the only metric. You could look at tax share relative to assessment share. There are different ways to look at your measures. This is simply one. But when you look at the assessment shares, in Jasper, 55% of the assessment is residential, 45% is non-residential. And in Banff, 54% is residential, 46% is non-residential. Compare that to Golden, 22% non-residential. The average for the group is about 20%. So it's actually quite a shift. And so while I know that there's more businesses in Banff per se, when you look at the share of the assessment base, it's pretty comparable. So there's also more residential properties in Banff, but as a share, they're pretty close. They're both in the national park, which also has so they both have similar constraints. And so the suggestion of this slide is one, to illustrate comparability for you to think about, and to suggest who might be a better comparator, the best comparator for you, which would be Banff, and why, which is I just described for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to target or do exactly what they're doing, but it is a useful benchmark for you to think about and compare to. And you make the other question, which is, where does the money come from? That's a perennial problem. You do have to find that balance, and it's difficult. I understand that's very difficult, and you have to make those decisions. I did make a suggestion in the report. If you were to look on a per dwelling basis in Banff and Jasper, you'll see relative to, and you'll see it in the report. I don't have it in the slides, but relative to, say, 30 comparably sized municipalities in Alberta of similar populations, residential taxes per dwelling are the lowest in Jasper and Banff, sitting at about $1,350 per unit. And I didn't do per capita, I did per unit. The average of these municipalities is about $2,000 per unit. So if the town wanted to target an average of select municipalities, there's actually tax room there. And you could look at this and say, I'm not here to try to help tell you how to justify or communicate with constituents, but one could look at this and say, well, if you target towards the average, is probably not an unreasonable target. Doesn't put you above. And it's just a suggestion. I know that you asked me the question, so I'm giving you an answer. It's the reason I'm giving you that. But it's one suggestion, and there are others. The intent of this recommendation overall is to explore what the ideal tax distribution within the municipality is relative to other jurisdictions, relative to what you would consider to be equitable. And ideally in the context of the existing tax policy that you're undertaking, because it's already going on, and it's a nice fit to try to bring that level of analysis in there.
Just one clarification. Did I hear you say that the percent of money from taxes coming from residential and commercial is about the same in Banff and Jasper right now?
I didn't say that. I said the percent of the assessment base in residential versus non-residential in Banff and Jasper is about the same. I would say on this slide here that because the tax rate ratios in Banff are 4.2 versus 5.0 in Jasper, I mean that's basically an indication that the tax rates are higher in Jasper. The non-residential to residential tax rates are higher in Jasper than in Banff, and that's really the one conclusion I can draw from this slide.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Don't touch your microphone. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Consrud. Just to continue on the conversation from Councillor Roger around the tax rate ratios, I'm really looking forward to that conversation that should be coming to us, I think, mid-June or in July. Radium, Fernie, Golden, Invermere all are have resort municipal status. And you did a report for us, I want to say it was in 2022 or 2023, trying to prove our case to the province why we should have resort municipal status. I just wonder if their ratios are lower because they do have other ways of getting funding because they have that status. And this has come up a little bit, and so I did reach out to CAO of BAM just to understand their tax rate ratio, and it's not a set 4-to-1. It moves between 4-to-1 and 5-to-1, depending on assessment value at that time. So what they try and prevent is big shifts in tax increases between sectors. So if the residential side increases a ton one year, they might see the business community might see a bit less. Like I think the idea behind there is if there's a 5% tax increase, they just want to make sure both sectors take about a 5% tax increase. So it kind of helps with that. But I wonder if your comparisons, did you factor in the BC communities having resort municipal status and what that actually means with a tax rate ratio or how the funding comes in?
That's a good question. So I didn't. And thank you for referencing, and maybe that's where I don't know if Councillor Roger was going to that direction of the resort municipality status, but so these communities do receive resort municipality funds through their hotel revenue sharing tax program. And what it does is that money is earmarked for investment in tourism infrastructure and amenities to accommodate host visitor populations. And it's impactful. So that's one factor that likely plays on these lower tax rate ratios. It's hard to explain Revelstoke, to be honest with you. That's a high tax rate ratio. Then I would say, so from a financing perspective, and you ask where the money comes from, that's one of the recommendations actually in strategic action is work with the province to build relations and access provincial supports. The views of the business community and the stakeholders that I interviewed with, and even sort of secondhand conversations, third-hand conversations about provincial government interest is there is some opportunity there worth exploring, and there might be some success in getting some funding for some recovery supports, business supports. So I think that is a meritorious approach. The resort municipality status is a challenging priority at this point in time. It's important to make that case. And as you've mentioned, I did do an analysis for the town and Banff and Canmore about fiscal capacity and what the cost of the visitor economy is on the community. That's an important quantification because it helps others understand what that cost is on the municipality. And it's unique. It is unique to Jasper, it's unique to Banff, due to Canmore and some others. In my view, that's a useful case to make. Maybe it's strategic. Perhaps there's no official status at this point in time that the town can get right now, but perhaps it's a useful argument to make when approaching the province for funding and other programs, those types of things. Good point on Banff's tax rate ratio policy. And I certainly don't intend to imply in these slides that what you see in these tax rate ratios is reflective of municipal policy choices. Rather, it's a reflection of where their tax rate ratios are today. And this is why I've referenced your property tax policy. That's a very important policy. Because through a policy like that, you can design the metrics that matter to you. You can evaluate the tax policy principles, equity, horizontal equity, benefits equity, or stability, or fairness, if you want to call it that, as the principles that the town will look at when setting tax rate policy, and then also the metrics that the town looks at when setting tax rate policy. So here I've got tax rate ratios. Perhaps you have a different metric. I just did work with the town of Canmore on their property tax policy. They like a tax share policy, and they've chosen tax share because it has more stability. And it has implications over their tax rate ratio, and they recognize that, but they've chosen a tax share target as part of their tax policy. So that's kind of where my recommendation would be. You have the ability to explore these issues, and it's really healthy to do so. The town of Canmore did this without a formal request from the business community because they just saw that it was time to update their policy from 10 years ago. And so my guidance would be, these are the recommendations I think from this report these are factors that the partners would request that the municipality explore as part of the tax rate policy that the council is currently prioritizing and could be coming back to you. And ideally, part of the benefit of setting a property tax policy is the process of engaging the stakeholders and evaluating the data to help inform and gain support for the tax policy that comes back to council. So that's my thoughts there. But good questions. Hopefully, probably went too far with them, but.
Thanks for that. And I see no other hands. Oh, sorry, Wendy. Councillor Hall.
Leave it. Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Another question I had for you, and this may be a question actually for Mr. Butler and Mr. Riopol in the gallery. 13% overall respondents, and generally representative of the business mix in the community. I'm just wondering where they're half hotels, half restaurants, half retail, because I know this was done in 2025 or late 2025, because what I'm, the restaurant I work in, what I'm starting to hear on the street is it is feeling busier and there's a bit more hope. I'm just not sure if that's actually relating to what's actually going on in the business community. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
In the report, I don't have it in the slides, but in the report in the appendix, there are two graphs that show the survey response distribution by type of business, and then the business license distribution by type of business. So you'll be able to compare the representation there, but it's generally pretty reflective. The one thing I would say is we've had a I would say, a higher response from, well, in the private home accommodation, I actually don't think we had a bit of a lower response from the private home accommodation than what was actually in the business license profile. But other than that, it was generally reflective, and I can describe it for you if you want. But no, I would suggest, I'd rather than me reading you some numbers. In terms of recovery, and I'll leave it for the partners to describe specifically what's happening now. I mean, I would say I would expect recovery right now. I would expect optimism right now. When we did the survey, one of the sensitive questions, but very important questions we did was revenue loss. So how much of your revenue did you lose over the first year following the fire, and then the second year? And then what do you anticipate will be your revenue for the next year? And so revenue loss was the greatest the first year, obviously. There was recovery, but there wasn't full recovery. And then when do you anticipate, and what does this next year look at? And it was moving up, right? So, and that is indicative of businesses getting to recovery. And so I think you can expect optimism. I think you can expect recovery, but can you expect full recovery? And as you saw in my presentation, the timing for when businesses fully recovers, 3.5 years, you see the numbers, 50% or so of them are suggesting it's going to be another year to two before they fully recover. And that is then, incorporated into the recovery scenarios that I presented to you today. So the optimism's there, and I would hope and expect that it would be there. But in terms of actually getting to those full recovery trajectories, as you see, there needs to be a bit of an intervention if we really want to get back to where we were going. Did you want me to ask the others?
Only if they had any insight, but I'm curious where people are feeling, business owners are feeling. Maybe Ms. Robbins can answer as well. I know they all work very closely with the business community, and being 3, 4, 5 months out from this report, I'm curious if there's more hope on the street. It's sort of what I feel, but again, I'm working in a busy restaurant that gets busier all the time, and I may just not be, feeling the entire business communities where they're at.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Councillor. I'll offer. I'll offer this perspective. There is a lot of optimism, and you're right. People are seeing that visitation is as strong as honestly we're able to accommodate right now. So I think we're also therefore have the expectation that as commercial accommodation and campground offerings are rebuilt, that we will see a return to earlier visitation levels in due course. What makes the question harder to answer is that businesses are finding that while their operating income they see that trajectory improving, their NOI, their net operating income, is what they're worried about. Costs are increasingly high, and I offer an example of where that plays. Rebuilding of commercial properties is slow, and in particular, we're noticing it's slow, and it looks like it's going to be slow in the supporting industrial area, and that raises operating costs, and so profitability is at risk. So what we are hearing is there's a lot of people on the street, and visitation is growing, but a lot of that visitation is not spending well. And it's difficult to capture the impact of that spending when your operating costs are looking like they're going to remain high due to loss of supporting industries. If you don't have a carpenter in town and you have to bring somebody in from out of town, those are the kind of impacts that it's harder to capture, but this work has dug into a little bit. So I would offer that.
Thanks for that. And I see Mayor Ireland has some questions or concerns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Conscript. And thank you, Mr. Brunin, for the report. And I apologize. I had to step out for a moment. So if I re-ask a question that was asked in my absence, I apologize. I have a number of comments and questions, but I'll start where we just left off with Mr. Butler. Accurate data is critical as we formulate plans and actions that we might take. And so if I start with the last strategic action that you mentioned, which is collect and report community priority data, you have suggested an annual survey. And I wonder whether you could comment on whether there might be a different approach that might give us more accurate data and not be as subject to, maybe the 13% that responded are a fair reflection, but maybe they're not. Particularly with respect to visitor counts, we have always relied, it seems to me, on the gate counts that Parks Canada does, which I am increasingly thinking is not necessarily a really strong metric. But spending profile is another thing, and you have measured the spend. And I wonder where you get that information and whether there is a way that we could collect that sort of information from source without relying on a voluntary survey. I mean, it would be really helpful, I think, if we could have access to verifiable, quantifiable data to help us make some decisions.
It's a good question. So the data are all imperfect. There's nothing that precisely measures any of the metrics that we would look to measure currently. In terms of the visitor spending data, there are some sources that are decently accurate. There is the Canadian, the Statistics Canada surveys that have measured visitor spending by regions, breaks them down by the Rockies, and then need to break those out further into Jasper and other areas. But they can be combined with other data such as hotel data. So, and those exist, and sometimes there are subscriptions. But if you subscribe, if entities, and this could be I made the suggestion of an economic development agency. I'll be more specific. Economic development agency, that's specific. If there's an economic development agency, one of its functions could be data stewardship. And that data stewardship could involve subscribing to accurate sources of information to help get more real-time info on visitor counts, accommodation rates, revenues, those types of things, because they exist. And then in addition to that, I think there's probably a way to improve in the region if the stakeholders are so inclined, and this would include Parks Canada, the municipality, and private interests, tracking and reporting visitor activity, and whether it's vacancies, et cetera, at all the types of accommodations, including the campgrounds, et cetera. So there does, if in my view, it requires a bit of a strategic focus on the metrics that are currently available, metrics that could be available, could they be made available at relatively minimal cost and effort, and how can they be tracked consistently over time? I think that there is that conversation. And that would be, I had made the suggestion of a survey simply because that's one of the more straightforward ways to approach the collection of this information. And the intent is you would have some form of survey, because the more frequently you do these surveys and the more priority you place on them, the more respondents will take them seriously, especially if they see how the use of these surveys is reflected in decision making. It's illustrative. All one needs to do is look to Statistics Canada to understand, what happens with the survey information. Yes, the census takes its time. Yes, nobody likes filling out the long form survey, but the richness of that data is very good. And it's used for decision making. So the question becomes, can an equivalent type of survey be implemented, or data collection method, depending on what you're collecting, be implemented in the community? The business community would likely respond consistently year over year if they recognized that information was being used for municipal decision making, particularly if it made for more engagement and more ability to influence outcomes in municipal decision making. And I think residents would also, and visitors would also participate. More likely residents and visitors, that would be one that ideally you would get through proxies, either surveys, or else you'd do it through collection of information through government agencies or private businesses.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of other questions, because I appreciate other councillors have many questions as well. And in any event, I think we can dig into this over successive months, so we don't have to resolve it all now. I just wanted to make a comment. You indicated in the report that the provincial government has prioritized growing tourism, and that there is a compelling case for investment in Jasper. And I absolutely agree with that. And yet, compelling as it is, it doesn't seem to have any real hope of actualization. In fact, the province is looking at investing in four-season resorts elsewhere in the province, which might bolster tourism, but might also be competitive to our local market. So do you see any real hope of convincing the province of the sort of investment in tourism in Jasper that would help with so many of the long-range recovery items? So you've mentioned, for example, for those that can rebuild, and I appreciate that too is questionable, because insurance and other sources of revenue to rebuild are really difficult and complicated. But even if it does happen, then the rest of the streetscape is left behind. It's the dated post-war product compared to the brand new product, and that changes the dynamic. So a great compelling case, I think, for provincial investment. But what would be the critical factor, do you think, that we could advance to actually gain that level of investment from the province?
It's a good question. It's an important question. I'm glad you picked up on it. I think there's a path, but it's about its strategic positioning and alignment, in my view, and alignment with the community stakeholders to start. If the business community and the municipality and the partners all sort of have a shared vision and have a shared set of priorities, and not everyone leads all the priorities all the time, but if everybody agrees on a suite of priorities that need to be advanced, then the various stakeholder groups or entities can then sing from the same song sheet, if you will, particularly with respect to the goal of recovery and growing the tourism industry. So I think fundamental alignment within the community is a precondition. And then secondly, and as you see it in my recommendation, the opportunity to build relations with the province. And I think a provincial engagement strategy, probably what I would recommend. I've got some ideas on that. I've seen, I do this as part of my business. And particularly on tourism, I see and experience and recommend strategies for building relations with others, notably the provincial government, and trying to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. I would say you're right in identifying that the province hasn't identified Jasper as a priority area for growing its tourism industry. And I think it's really more a matter of strategy and approach than as a starting point than anything else, in part because the province has identified these other areas as growth opportunities through the processes that they've undertaken. And I think advocacy on behalf of your community is a key component of raising awareness of the importance. And then joint advocacy with community stakeholders demonstrates alignment, and I would say demonstrates positive return opportunity for another entity like the provincial government to want to make investment, right? So thinking about it from their perspective is very, very important, and finding ways to make sure that when there's a positioning or an opportunity for the town, there's a benefit to the province as well.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We'll undoubtedly come back to it. As you will appreciate, you and I have worked on this for a long time, and despite what we think are compelling arguments focused on the provincial interest, they never seem to quite make it to the top of the heap. I had one other question, and then I will leave it. You have given us a range of strategic options, and I appreciate. And when Mr. Riopel opened the discussion, he gave us a suggested motion to further engage and come back to council with some recommendations. But before you leave, I would like to know whether, of all of the strategic options that you have left with us, where do you think we would be best served to have our focus? So, I mean, I appreciate there's air access, there is, as we just discussed, further provincial investment, there is development of new product, there is extending the seasons for better distribution, there is, of course, the labor force issue, including recruitment and retention, but also including housing. There is a commercial cap. I mean, those are all important things, but whether as council or as a community, we have limited resources and limited capacity. So from your perspective, if you can, what should be the focus?
So yeah, I'm happy to share my thoughts here, particularly in the context of Municipality of Jasper Municipal Council from a priority perspective. And in the appendix, you'll see I have all the strategic actions summarized, so it's easy to reference them. So my suggestion, I think, would be the first would be the develop and enhance the shoulder and winter season experiences. So I'm not ranking these in order of priority per se, so much as I'm ranking them in order. I'm listing the priority actions that I think the municipality can have the most impact and influence over. This initiative about evaluate, rank, and prioritize amenity development opportunities, that's a very important exercise. And while the municipality isn't the sole lead there, the municipality is a key contributor. And getting the stakeholders, so Parks Canada, yourselves, and the partners in the room, and potentially, obviously with the partners, but you'll want the private interest views. Evaluating, ranking, and prioritizing amenity development opportunities, I think, is a worthwhile exercise, and in particular, with a strategic focus about how do you track and prioritize and action performance over time. And then the other, I think the reducing the business cost priority, that's very important. That was quite, as you see, it's a theme, it's a top priority that was identified. We had talked about how you might approach that already, but using the property tax policy, I think, and ensuring your approach to this property tax policy incorporates or engages and addresses these issues and approaches it thoughtfully, I think is a strategic action and a successful approach that you could take that would help move this. The prioritizing local business recovery, balance, and revitalization is also, I think, a key priority area for the municipality. And this is another one of those that involves the businesses and Parks Canada and the municipality. There's some breadth to this recommendation. There's a lot in it, and there's the need for the involvement of all three groups to take this on. Because I think that there's some opportunity and near-term success that can be driven from this. There's some momentum that can be built from this. And there's also a long-term opportunity that can be realized over time as a result of the successful creation of an economic development agency. Transformative. I don't want to say them all. I can't say that. But what I will say is on this policy strategic actions, the policy, so that shared vision for the future of Jasper's business community, I think that one is important. I think it's less intensive, roll up your sleeves as the other ones I'd suggested, but this is one that sets the tone of the relationship with the business community. And if that tone is set well, I think it actually makes all the rest of the recommendations work better, more smoothly. Whether it's you'd ask me about provincial advocacy, this helps. You'd ask me about recovery or I don't know. You didn't actually ask me too much about that one, but it does help with recovery. And it will help with the vibrancy and resiliency. And what it does is it's the interface of the business community, with the municipality and the residents, who elect you. I mean, it's kind of at the heart of the guidance. So that's a key one. Other than that, we had talked about the data collection piece, but if you were to, I'd say, assign that into the economic agency, then you've kind of captured that strategic action without having too long of a list. But I think that's a good piece. And then the provincial relations, similarly, this shared vision alignment. I think provincial advocacy is very important. I would recommend that the municipality prioritize this one. I think this one's got some challenges in it that it just require strategic, maybe a reframing of the approach. As you know, you had mentioned it to me, Mayor. You've been talking about provincial relations for years. How do we get over this? I think there's some effort that, taken earnestly on this one with maybe a fresh approach. I do feel optimism that there can be some success, but I think it's going to take a little effort. So that would be my summary. Right. Now, I have partners that funded this that might have additions to that, so I'm going to leave that caveat on the table.
We can get into a room with them just about any time. We don't always get into a room with you, so happy to have that. So I thank you for all of that. Thank you for the report. And just in closing, thank you for confirming that those who retained you on this project appear to still be committed to the Jasper Destination Stewardship Plan as a guiding document, which I think is of critical importance. It can, and it's not necessarily a roadmap, but it provides a guide. And I was glad to see it mentioned so positively throughout your reports. Thank you for that.
Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consard, and thank you, Mr. Vernon, for your comprehensive report. I just have a couple of I guess, an observation first. I like your term "set the tone" when it comes to communication and cohesion between the business community and council. I think clearly we have some work to do there. I think we've got a lot of things that would be radically improved if we could have a little more cohesiveness between our two groups. I think that's something that I've noticed in my short term here. But I think we're heading in the right direction. At the end of the day, I think we're all in here, we're all at the pulling in the same direction, if you will, and we want to get our community back up and running as soon as we can, and that includes business and certainly our residents. We've taken a big hit here. One of the things that that has come to the table here many times is a couple of things. One is the perhaps lack of engagement within the community between business and council and really the community at large, actually. But it's interesting, you know, we'll invite all members of the community to attend a session, whether it's off-site levies or taxes or whatever. And it's interesting, people line up to stay away. So you can only do so much. We of course want to get information from the community. That's the essence of it. That's the decision-making tool that we need at the end of the day. Now, having said that, I think data and statistics, of course, is a moving target, and never more so than it is in our community right now. I know you were saying that a lot of your data was correlated at the end of 25 into the early part of 26 in terms of visitors, etc. And I guess it depends who you talk to. Parks Canada will tell you that visitorship is up right now from last year. So, like I say, it's a moving target. One of the things, a specific question, something that has been on our plate since I've been here, and I guess it's been a perennial forever, is of course the tax split and the perceived ideas that should be changed or in one direction or the other. Now, one of the things that we have happening here, of course, is the bulk of our property losses were residential. And the cost of the rebuild, I know you touched on it a little bit with insurance and whatnot, the cost of the rebuild for our residents has been extraordinarily high, not because they had to, by and large, have to pay for it, but the cost of housing contractors to rebuild these homes has gone up 60, 70%. So if you can appreciate somebody that is in a house that was $600,000 or $700,000 before the fire, it's now 1.3 million retired people. So the effect of that marketplace, and we've had a presentation from our appraiser, this is where the tax base is going to land. We did lose commercial properties. A good many of them were old, long-standing properties that were probably owned and we would hope insured. But at the end of the day, most of our properties were residential. So the decision we have, of course, if we ever were to readdress that, and somebody now gets a tax bill based on an appraisal of a house that's double what it was before the fire, have been living along as a retired individual, the combination of that new mill rate is going to be debilitating and crushing for people. Mm-hmm. So the business community, and I appreciate that business is challenging, but we see what I'm hearing from the business communities is their leases are going up 50, 60%. So it's very difficult to rationalize a 1% or a 0.5% differential in our mill rate today, our differential, to make up for that kind of increased lease rent. It's extraordinary. So I guess my point is it's a question and a comment, but I think for this council to address shifting that burden, if you will, onto the residents would be astronomical for many, many, many people. I know people whose houses were worth $500,000 and the insurance companies paid $1.2 million to rebuild it. So if that house or anything else like it sells, guess where your mill rate is? So that's the issue. And I think that it's always going to be a discussion here, but I certainly don't see an answer to that.
I can appreciate exactly what you're saying. My observation would be You saw, I put up a metric called the tax rate ratio, and you saw those comparisons. So that's only one metric. So one other metric is tax share, the share of tax collected from each segment of the base, such as the non-residential versus the residential. Because really, at the end of the day, you're looking at a situation where you see the assessed value of these properties increase. And if you hold your mill rate constant for these properties, they're paying more taxes. But is that the right metric? Or is the right metric the taxes share collected or the average taxes paid per unit? Those are different things, right? So if you target taxes per unit, or if you target tax share collected from residential versus non-residential, your mill rate floats. And what you're doing is you're paying attention to the tax burden, and then your tax policy would be set by trying to manage that tax burden. So there's a way through it that way. If that was something that you were concerned with. And that's a similar approach you would want to see done on the non-residential side of things, because they're faced very significant costs as well. You mentioned the rents. If you take a look at my report, we did a survey question on rental increases. The rents most likely will be going up for these businesses. It's unlikely that any of them will. There's very few that indicated they might be staying the same, and then they could be going up quite a bit, but nobody fully knows. And then the insurance side, from a non-residential perspective, the replacement cost insurance really doesn't exist generally on the non-residential side of things. They're insured for a value, they get insurance payment, and there's going to be a gap between what they had and what they can rebuild, and they have to make a decision on what they do about that gap. Do they rebuild smaller? Do they take out loan, other financing, et cetera, which is largely different than a residential base, particularly if they had replacement cost insurance. So it's not an easy situation. What I would offer to you is a suggestion that there are different ways to look at the tax burden. It's important you pay attention to that. And at the end of the day, you come up with a tax policy that's informed by those types of discussions and takes into account the impact on the business community as well as the impact on the residents, and ideally engage them in the process for doing it. Maybe you have a property tax task force with representation from the various groups to make sure you have that accountability to those groups when you're making these decisions. And at the end of the day, that helps ensure that the policy choices you make are informed by those stakeholder contributions to what they think the tax burden should be. Those are some suggestions for you and some observations. Hopefully they're helpful.
Yes, they are. Thank you for that. Now, you mentioned that only 70% of the business community are rebuilding. Is that accurate?
70% confirmed they plan to rebuild. And then so 30% were unsure at the time of the survey. They weren't sure if they're going to rebuild or what their options were, or whether they were going to sell their property and others would rebuild it. But the survey responded said, yeah, 70% said they would rebuild.
So this was building owners, not businesses within the building.
That's right. This was the property owner survey.
So 30% of them will not be, or they're not sure.
That's correct. The one conclusive statistic was 70% said they would rebuild.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I just wanted to make a couple of points. First, I'd like to echo the mayor's comments about appreciation for putting such an emphasis on the Jasper Destination Stewardship Plan. I read that and absorbed it and felt that it was a really critical piece of document for moving forward. And the other thing that really resonated for me was the fundamental alignment with partners. I think that you can achieve significantly more when you're not working in silos, and that it's from my perspective, I think that's where I would see a very strong need to work collectively as a community. And along that vein, one of the things that I feel challenged when we look at tax rates is that the two are inextricably linked, that if we increase at the residential level, it raises the residential rents, which makes it more difficult to attract people. So there's always such a delicate balance to ensure that we're making really informed and strong decisions. So having that conversation collectively, I think, will be valuable.
Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I also just wanted to echo Councillor Waxer, Mayor Ireland's reference to the stewardship plan being referenced in this plan. I also read through the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center recovery framework that we approved in August of 2025. And after reading through both documents, this report and that report, I don't see these as competing visions for recovery. I think they go hand in hand. They're like two pieces of the pie. The JRCC recovery framework focuses really heavily on building a healthy community, while the VIR report focuses on building a strong economy. And I don't think either will succeed without the other. And I think what ties these two reports together is that stewardship plan, which reminds us that if we take care of the residents take care of the visitors. And I absolutely love that line. I love the 5 pillars. I think it really recognizes that people are essential to long-term business recovery and resilience. Both reports, the recovery framework and this report, identify housing as a critical challenge. They identify the importance of visitor recovery, and they also emphasize what Councillor Waxer was just referring to, the need for really strong partnerships. I know that economic recovery is essential, and we definitely need our locally owned and operated businesses to succeed. We need visitors to return. We need jobs to grow. But healthy economies, I believe, are built by healthy people. Housing, connection, social recovery, I don't think are separate from economic recovery. And the challenge here on this table isn't going to be choosing between those two things. It's going to be figuring out how we advance those together. So I just want to thank you very much, Mr. Brunin, for your thoughtful report that I think helps us better understand the economic challenges ahead and the opportunities that are available to support Jasper's long-term recovery.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. And I would agree. Your framing of the various reports and the alignment that they share, that's an important contribution, important to recognize as you advance your priorities and see that they are complementary. And your framing of this as being that economic sort of recovery focus. I mean, that's really where the focus of this is, and it's that complement to the other recovery pieces. And that was, I think, the intent of the project sponsors. And I should mention the framing and the destination stewardship plan. Like, that was quite clearly a priority for the partners. They saw the value, they see the value in this stewardship plan, and they want to see this economic recovery component integrated and reflected in it. So I think that's illustrative of the orientation and the approach that the partners intend to take and want to take. And I think you can see that it reflected in the report that I completed for you. But thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Mayor Ireland.
If there are not more questions, you have questions. Okay. Right. I was going to make a motion, but you go right ahead. You're the boss.
I just have 3 or 4 pages of notes, which I'm not going to bring up my questions, concerns, or thoughts, but I would like to let council know that I'm not going to vote in favor of just accepting the report. I'd like to accept the report and direct administration to work with the 4 parties involved here to put an action group together to work together, because I feel like we represent all of the community. I can speak for myself, and what the business community has to say is very important. I've reached out to them a lot, and by me saying my points or, well, how about this or how about that, and then you get defensive, and I just don't think that's working. Like, there's a lot of things that the business community wants us to do. There's a lot we have done. there's a lot we can't do, like Nordic Centers or improving Highway 93. But I do want to make sure that the business community knows that we're listening, and we sit together. I would gladly like to attend that, and however that works, I'm still fairly new, so I don't know how. But we need to get together and then move forward. You may not get everything that you want, or at least, you know, we can say what we can do or what we can't do. And I think that would work well, because the business community is a big part of the municipality, and the municipality is, I believe, a big part of the business community. Thank you. So I guess, yeah, I'm not going to vote in favor of that, but I will relinquish the chair if need be in order to pass a motion to you, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cable-Consrud. Thank you, all of the councillors, for all of your questions. I did want to jump in until maybe this point. Appreciate the report, and I do believe that Mr. Riopel had a suggestion that the mayor is going to perhaps bring forward as a recommendation, as opposed to what we have in front of us to just accept the report. I think it's critical that we would act on this, and that we frame the activity to be included in the next budget year. And I'm hoping that His Worship, in his motion, has a time sensitivity, so that we can move forward and taking this report and balancing it with the other priorities in the municipality, as well as the needs of our residents, that we can use this information and realign the community, as you say. And with that, no questions for you. I just wanted to indicate that I think this is a very healthy, robust discussion, and I'll leave it to His Worship if he would like to make the motion.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. Thank you, Councillor Melnick, for making me adjust my proposed motion. And you're right. Although I didn't transcribe it perfectly, I did listen to Mr. Riopel, and I think I can come close to what he wanted. And then I anticipate that there will be further engagements of this nature. Anyway, my two-part motion is that committee receive the report for information, and that committee direct administration to return to a future committee of the whole meeting prior to 2026 budget presentations, with a report identifying opportunities for council and the municipality to support the recommendations and strategic actions in the report presented today. So to your point, Deputy Mayor Consrud, it's less than a full jump in, but the report is relatively recent. It's the first time it's been presented publicly. I think we owe it to administration to take a close look at it, engage further with the sponsoring partners as they deem necessary, to figure out our own strategic response and where the opportunities best lay in our continued engagement. So give them a chance to look into it, report back to us, and if there are budget implications, then of course we would want this to come forward before we dive into budget in the fall. So that gives a couple of months. I'm not sure what the capacity limits will be, but it's something that will need a response before budget time at a minimum. So that is the essence of my motion, and I agree it's a I don't want to just receive the report and have it sit on a shelf. I want to take action, but I want administration to have an opportunity to report back with having identified our best opportunities to support the recommendations in the report.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrude. I agree with the motion, and I appreciate the timeline addition there. I also appreciate that this afternoon this presentation is going to be made to the public, and I think it would be prudent for us to hear what's going to be going and being said in the presentation in a public venue as well. And I think that'll help us as we move forward. And what we hear in the public who will be seeing this for the first time, other than this meeting this afternoon.
Thanks for that, Councillor Melnick. Is there any comments on the mayor's motion? If not, I have one comment, and then we'll ask the question. I may be out of line, but I'm going to vote against that because probably my ignorance to the whole thing, but it's like I've been reaching out to the business community and they've been reaching out to me, and we've sat and talked and we've just been spinning our wheels, and I don't know how to rectify that, but waiting for the report to get back. I don't like that, and I don't know what to do, but it's just I'm not in favor of that, but we'll call the question, or we'll call the motion of Mayor Islands. All in favor? All opposed? 6-4, 1 against. Passed. Now we'll go into this is still the delegation portion of our agenda, where any member of the community can come forward to address count. Oh, thank you, Mr. Brunin. I really appreciate your report.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Appreciate it.
And I'll look to the floor if there's anybody else that would like to speak their piece. And I'll also look out to our Zoom live streamers or YouTube. We really appreciate it when people come to these meetings, and if they have something to say, we welcome their 3-minute piece. And moving on, we haven't received any correspondence. I think we will take a 7-minute break. We'll meet back at 11:25 to start new business. Welcome back. And that brings us into Welcoming Week 2026. I'll look to CAO Givens to talk to that.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. I'll be brief. Going all the way back to 2017, Jasper Municipal Council has proclaimed its commitment to fostering a welcoming and inclusive Jasper. This is consistent with our equity, diversity, and inclusion policy. And for a number of years now, the municipality has participated in what is an international and national effort called Welcoming Week. Across the country and internationally, this is typically celebrated in October, but in Jasper's context, we welcome a lot of new residents as businesses staff up for the summer. And so for a number of years now, Council has been making a proclamation to recognize Welcoming Week in June. Local organizations and administration have worked together to plan a significant number of events from June 14th to June 20th as we welcome our summer residents that are coming to work in our community. So there's a draft proclamation in front of you today and a list of the events for the week. And so the recommendation is that committee recommend council approve the 2026 Welcoming Week proclamation.
Thanks for that, And would somebody care to make a motion that we recommend that? Councillor Roger.
Move that committee recommend council claim June 14th to 20th, 2026 as welcoming week in Jasper.
Thanks. All in favor? Oh, sorry. We'll have some discussion on that. I see Kathleen Waxer as there. Director, Councillor Waxer as there.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I just wanted to speak to this and to, from my perspective, highlight the importance and value of this by being a welcoming and inclusive community, especially a community that has an ever-changing peoplescape, new people every year. We stand to gain from the learning from these new residents, having welcoming their participation as volunteers and their contribution to our economy. And I think the more welcoming we are, the more likely all those benefits will come back to enrich the community. So I very much am in favor of this proclamation.
Thanks for that. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I'm also very happy to support this proclamation, particularly as we continue on recovery and attracting and welcoming new residents is essential to our community's future. I think this week is an opportunity to recognize those contributions and to reaffirm that Jasper truly is a place where people from all backgrounds can feel valued, connected, and at home. And I encourage everyone to take part in all the events that are happening this week.
Mayor Ireland.
I am supportive. This is a recommendation to council, so it will be back before us. And I wonder whether in the last of the preambles, whether we might add that everyone is valued and has the opportunity to contribute and to share in the benefits. Because it's not just the contribution that makes this a welcoming community, it's the fact that we can share in the prosperity of the community. So if I just throw that out as a suggestion.
Thanks for that. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Is it a motion?
It's a motion to accept the addition proposed by Mayor Ireland.
Okay.
If that's acceptable to the original mover, Councillor Roger.
Yes, the original motion can be amended to incorporate what Mr. Ireland, Mayor Ireland added. Thank you.
Thanks for that, gang. And ask the question. All in favor of the amended motion? Unanimous. It's passed. And moving on, we welcome Director Beth Sanders to talk about Planning and Development Advisory Committee membership.
Thank you. Good morning, Deputy Mayor Consrud and Council. In municipal decision-making, when it comes to land use, there is usually a body, whether it's Parks Canada or a municipality, that serves to make some decision-making when things are not as straightforward that a development officer would typically handle. So when an application comes in, the development officer assesses an application to determine if it aligns with the rules, and if it does, permits are issued. If it doesn't, there's an extra process. Within the Parks Canada world, that process is the Planning and Development Advisory Committee. And on May 22nd, the field unit superintendent of Jasper National Park wrote to Mayor Ireland to invite members of council to sit on the Planning and Development Advisory Committee. So the decision before you today is to consider whether or not council members would like to play that role. And just a quick note to let you know that if you choose to participate on PDAC, you're not choosing to participate as council. You're choosing to participate as individual council members. The land use policy that Parks Canada uses to guide land use development in town is fairly fixed. It prescribes what the role of PDAC is. So should council members choose to participate, it's pretty well scripted out. It would be an opportunity for you as council members to learn about how and to experience land use planning decisions. In the short term, it would just give you experience participating and wrestling with the pros and cons of a development proposal. You would host something that would look and feel like a public hearing. And then what you would do is deliberate and make a decision, which would be a recommendation to the superintendent to make a final decision. So your role, again, is not as council making any decisions, but as individual council members serving on PDAC and then making a recommendation. Process-wise, administration has been working closely with Parks Canada administration to flesh out how this could work. Should you choose to do that, there's some details on that in the RFD that's in front of you, and I'm open to answering any questions. And perhaps I'll leave it at that, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, and see if there's any questions of council. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Looking to council. Councillor Rogers, then Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Constant, through you to Ms. Sanders. Two questions. The first one is, well, first of all, I'm saying I'd be willing to volunteer for it if there's a space. The second question is, historically, what's been the time of day and how often is it meet historically?
I'm not entirely sure of what time of day would be. In terms of frequency, there has been one PDAC meeting since the fire in 2024. That's probably because of extenuating circumstances and parks making great efforts to help developments and people rebuilding get through. It could be a little bit more frequent than once every 2 years. I would expect a handful of meetings over the course of the next year, say. Time of day will be determined by the PDAC members' schedule. So administratively, what I imagine will happen is Parks administration will coordinate with our administration to coordinate with the council members that are interested. So we as administration will support finding a date and time that works. So that, I think, has yet to be determined what time of day it would be, Councillor Roger.
Thank you.
Councillor Melnick, do you have some concerns?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. Thank you for this request for decision. Director Sanders, I've two observations that perhaps for clarity. In the request for decision, there's a bullet points that indicate that the meetings will unfold similar to municipal public hearing and deliberation in public. However, in the attachment, that similar bullet point presentation says committee will deliberate in camera. And I'm wondering, is it one or the other or a combination of both?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to Councillor Melnick. It's a common practice in the planning and development world that when a council, or in this case Parks Canada, identifies residents that wish to serve on a committee like this, that they deliberate in private so that when they're public, it's not known who voted for what or against what, and it's a way of ensuring that the people who participate on such a committee have a level of privacy and protection. However, There are other instances where councils play the role of this kind of role, which of course, as a council, you would deliberate on a matter like this in public. You would not do it behind closed doors. So we're in a world where, while you would not be participating as council members, administratively, we wanted to recommend that you deliberate in public, not behind closed doors, because that's how you behave as an elected body. Parks Canada is open to, of course, PDAC in this case, if it were members of council, for you folks to say, yes, we will be deliberating in public. So it is a little bit of a both and.
Thank you for the explanation. And my second observation is council terms are 4 years, and the term in section 4.04 indicates an appointment for a term of 3 years, which would mean we'd have to be reappointed, I would guess, after that 3 years. And then in a subsequent election, members would have to be reappointed based on the makeup of the council.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to Councillor Melnick, the land use policy and everything that it says is at the discretion of the superintendent. So the policy as it's written right now would be that you would be appointed for a 3-year term. I'm also imagining a world where land use planning authority comes to the municipality, which may happen before that 3-year term appointment. But the superintendent does have the authority to appoint people, remove people. So the timing would be at the discretion of the superintendent. At this point in time, the superintendent's request to council members is, would you like to serve? And if yes, please identify 5 council members who would like to serve, 2 alternates, and then please also identify who the chair would be. So that would be, if council is wanting to go down this road, then the recommendation in front of you is that the mayor you allow the mayor to identify who those folks are. I do want to say that there is an application moving through the process in parks that will require convening PDAC. So this isn't like thou shalt make a decision today, but very soon PDAC is going to be needed. So there is a little bit of a time constraint on this file.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. I think I see this as an opportunity to strengthen transparency and improve my understanding between parks and municipality, and maybe bring the community a little bit closer to how those decisions are made. I wonder, though, because we'd be sitting as regular residents, how would we manage a situation where a recommendation might overlap with a municipal issue that would come before council? If we've sat as residents, then that feels a bit blurry to me, but maybe it's not.
Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, through you to Councillor Hall, the kind of matters that would be before PDAC are planning and development matters, which we have no authority over. So there's that level of clarity that you're making a recommendation as residents to the superintendent, who has the full authority to make a decision. The nuance that could be a little bit different, but again, you would formally be sitting as residents, not council, is when planning and development decisions are made, there's typically questions around operations, like if it's a new development, is there enough water and wastewater supply to the development? Which of course, municipal administration will be in attendance to answer those questions, which typically are questions that surface at the earlier iteration of PDAC anyway. You would need to be clear, and administration will support you to be clear, that when you're sitting as PDAC, you are not sitting as council. You are sitting as residents who happen to be members of council, but you're not representing municipal interests, if I can put it that way.
Councillor Hall.
If I just may, one follow-up question. Do you know then why the superintendent wanted councillors sitting as residents as opposed to just residents who aren't councillors?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to Councillor Hall. In her correspondence, the superintendent recognizes that administration also does that this is an opportunity for the process of PDAC, the decision-making process, and the recommendations that go to the superintendent to be more public, to be more transparent. In this venue, for example, I would propose that when PDAC convenes, we can convene right here. We dress down the room so it does not say Municipality of Jasper, but we can use the technology. So when PDAC convenes, this very process of having people come and speak to PDAC and say what they like or don't like about a proposed development, everyone can watch it. Displaced residents can watch it. Anybody who wants to sit at home can watch it. Or folks can come and speak to PDAC in person. So there's that transparency. There's also, we can offer the recording. So if somebody wants to watch it after the fact, but also that as council members, you're used to and are comfortable with deliberating in public. And that also increases the transparency. So that is part of the invitation that's explicit. You also have an opportunity to lean into this exact kind of decision making, which will be yours to make fundamentally when you have planning and development authority. So you as individuals get a chance to practice and make it public and clear and transparent.
If I may just, so this is a 3-year term. So to me that says, and just for my own clarification, once the municipality takes over land use and planning, there will still be a PDAC, or is that going to be, that's just us now?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to Councillor Hall, one of the decisions that we will be bringing to council as progress is made on the transfer of authority is how you wish to handle these types of files. So in other municipalities, it's a thing that could be called a municipal planning commission. And one of our recommendations will be to you to decide, do you want to have a municipal planning commission or do you not want to have a municipal planning commission? You will make a much better educated choice on that matter once you've had a chance to deliberate with these kinds of files. So it's an opportunity for you to educate yourselves about what a municipal planning commission would be. Does it fit in Jasper? Some municipalities choose not to have it. So this will be informative for you. But PDAC will not continue to exist. When the land use policy migrates over, it'll turn into a land use bylaw. And in there, you will need to have clear instructions about how to handle the kinds of files that don't conform, or when somebody wants to change the rules in some fashion. You ultimately as council will have the final say, and you're going to have to determine a mechanism by which you might want this sort of process or not.
Thanks for that, Director Saunders. Do you have something you'd like to add, CEO Givens?
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. I guess for all of council, the easiest way to sum this up, or the most concise way, would be this is a bit of a trial run and a transition step. So it's not changing any of the rules or the land use policy or who has what authority or any of those things. It's saying, could the municipality of Jasper, through the people who are council members serving on PDAC, become more involved in this process? And how might that change? So it's a little bit of a trial run to see what it's like for all parties, and an opportunity to improve, as Director Sanders said, the transparency using existing municipal processes. So really that's what it is. It's about how might we integrate municipal council and municipal processes into the land use planning process that exists today without changing the system. So it, like I say, trial run is the best way to think about it.
Thanks for that, Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. I just wanted to say that I initially felt extremely enthusiastic about the learning opportunity and having the opportunity to be involved before we took on responsibility. And I think I am still enthusiastic, but I think we'll have to be very, very careful to provide information to the public that this will not be council making decisions. It will be each of us as individual residents sitting on that, so that that there's clarity in the community about the role.
Thanks for that, Councillor Waxer and Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Conscript. Ms. Sanders, who all will sit on this board? Would it just be council in Parks Canada, or will it be members from the public also, or what's the whole body made up of?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsgrud, to Councillor Frechette, the Planning and Development Advisory Committee consists of 5 individuals who are appointed by the superintendent. In this case, the superintendent has made a request to the municipality inviting you to identify 5 council members plus 2 alternates, and also to identify a chair. So this request is specific to council for you folks to decide amongst yourselves who would be the 5 that would sit as PDAC. So the process that you could imagine unfolding would be there's a file that comes in to Parks Canada's development office, and for some reason it needs the rules to be changed. So let's say the building needs to be 2 meters higher, and that's a significant variance to the rules. So in this sort of scenario, Parks Canada is going to convene PDAC. And in this scenario, it would mean Parks Canada administration will connect with our administration, we'll check with whoever the 5 people are, we'll find a date and time, notice will go out to the public, and then it will be like a public hearing where Parks Canada, the development officer, would lay out, here's the development proposal, here are the facts, here's what's asking to be changed. You could expect to hear from the applicant, and then you could expect, like a public hearing, to hear from a range of people who support the application or who do not support the application. Then the 5 members of PDAC are going to deliberate in public, and then you're going to render a recommendation, your decision, which would then be sent over to the superintendent to either go with that recommendation or not. But that's what the role of PDAC would be. So this is a shift that council members, so elected representatives, but not serving as council, I know there's a nuance here, have an opportunity to play that role as PDAC instead of the superintendent making a call for applications, people apply, and then proceeding as it has been. So, and as CAO Given mentioned, this is an opportunity for you as council members to do a trial run, learn and understand more about the land use planning process and the tricky decisions and the pros and cons that the community have to weigh when somebody, an applicant, wants the rules to be different than they are. And this is an opportunity for community voice to make a recommendation to the superintendent.
Thank you. And so this is indeed a bit of a precursor to what the transition will look like eventually. So ostensibly, there's only going to be 5 members of council on this board. There won't be anybody from Parks or from the community at large. It'll just be us 5 members. And we'll appoint a chair in-house between us 5, or whoever the 5 are. And we will go through the process like PDAC does now, except, of course, there won't be any members of the public other than, I guess we will be members of the public, but in a different capacity.
Yes, in this scenario, the members of the public will be 5 members who also happen to be on council. And you will deliberate and make your recommendation to the superintendent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Director Sanders. I want to add quickly that I don't know if it's important that we pick five of us and 2 alternates, because ultimately that's all of us, and the alternates might go to as many meetings as the actual committee. So, and I don't know, there's Mayor Ireland is going to have to decide on the one person that isn't on the committee, but I just thought I'd add that so we can chew on that for a minute. And to you, Councillor Roger.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to Ms. Sanders. Quick question. You said that we would deliberate in public. I thought we were deliberating in private after the people have said put their submissions in.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsgrud, to Councillor Roger, administratively, and I'll own this. I made an assumption that as council members, you would like to deliberate in public. If you wanted to deliberate in private, you could. That is what the policy states right now. And if it was important to you to deliberate in public, that is an option for you, and Parks is open to that. And I'll leave it at that, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud.
So it's our choice, public or private, depending on the circumstances.
Yes, it is. I would recommend that you deliberate in public, because when you have planning and development authority, that is going to happen in public. And I think to have an open, clear, transparent policy, as you're familiar with as council members, there are very limited circumstances where you deliberate in private. It's very limited.
Thanks for that, Mayor Ireland.
Just on this point, and because thank you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. On this point, and because we're not at motion yet, I'll ask Director Sanders. My view of PDAC is that it would be quasi-judicial. So you have a hearing, and so for Councillor Roger and I, if you go before a panel of judges and appeal, usually everything is public, but then they go in the back room and deliberate. And I could certainly, I mean, I do understand the importance of decision-making by council being public, but we are at pains to say this is not council. And so these members of council will be sitting in their individual capacity as members of PDAC. And because it is, as I say, quasi-judicial, it seems to me that it is not inappropriate that they hold the hearing in public and deliberate in private. Things might get said about individuals that are not fit for the public record, but have to be discussed by the body that hears it, in this case PDAC, in a safer space. So I am not convinced that the council imperative to be public necessarily applies to a separate body that is not council.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to Mayor Ireland, if council would like to accept this invitation and deliberate in private, that's not going to be a problem. I think this is a choice for you folks to make. The main imperative here is you have an invitation to serve, and would you like to take that opportunity to serve and learn about the process and do the trial run?
Thanks for that, CAO Given.
Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to Mayor Ireland's question or sort of observation about it being PDAC being semi-judicial, and I'll check I'm looking over at Director Sanders at the same time here, but my perception of PDAC, and I guess certainly as long-time Jasperites, you'll know what types of decisions go to it often, but it's not just semi-judicial. So in municipalities with planning authority, there are appeal boards, and those are explicitly semi-judicial, where an applicant makes an assertion that the planning laws were inappropriately administered. So they make a case. And so in a subdivision and development appeal board from another municipality, that's explicitly semi-judicial. My sense is that PDAC may do some of that, but PDAC also views things that are variances or changes, where somebody is saying, where there's some subjectivity to whether something should be allowed or not. Like, is this a good idea? Which is not semi-judicial. It's opinion-based. So it's another example of where the system in Jasper is not exactly the same as it is in other municipalities. PDAC seems to fill this void for a couple of different things. And so potentially the people that were sitting there could make some choices about whether the issue that they're dealing with is semi-judicial in nature, where an applicant is saying the administration of this policy was incorrect, versus I want to go beyond what the policy says is allowed, which would be a variance, right? And those are slightly different matters. But just for those that might be familiar with appeals, they're a separate, in other municipalities, they're a separate thing. PDAC seems to blend both appeals and variances.
Thanks for that. Any other discussion? Would anybody care to make a motion? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consroot. I will make a motion. It is only slightly different in nuance from the recommendation, but again, I make a change in wording only to emphasize once again that if the motion passes, members of council will sit in their individual capacity as members of PDAC. And so the motion that I would make is that committee recommend council accept the Jasper Field Superintendent's invitation for members of council in their individual capacities to serve as members of the Planning and Development Advisory Committee, and that the mayor identify 5 individuals to serve as regular members of the committee, 2 individuals to serve as alternates on the committee, and the chair of the committee. I make this motion with a bit of hesitancy. I have experience as an elected person, not in an individual capacity, giving advice to an administrative body, that is the Superintendent of Parks Canada. And I don't want anything to suggest to the community that we have gone back to an elected body giving advice to a federal bureaucracy. And there is, I think, some risk of public perception to council in proceeding in this step, because it will look to some as if it is council advising the superintendent. And speaking to Councillor Waxer's point earlier about decision-making, these 5 members will not be making decisions. They will be making recommendations, and the superintendent will be making decisions. It is a critical nuance. And as I say, there is some risk, but on reflection, I think there may be a greater risk to the superintendent. Because if these hearings are public, as we suggest they should be, whether the deliberations are or not, the hearings will be, it is with some risk that the superintendent cannot follow the recommendation. And so in these circumstances, we have received this outreach. It is an opportunity to advance the ongoing transition of jurisdiction over land use planning and development to the community, and that's a good thing. It's a limited term. And I suppose if things fall apart, we could always abandon before the 3 years are up anyway. So it's a risk on both sides, and I respect the superintendent for having made the offer, because I'm sure the superintendent has perceived the same degree of risk and is nevertheless proceeding. So on that basis, I have made the motion, which I support.
Thanks for that. Any discussion? I'll ask the question. All in favor? 7 in favor, passed. To you, Mayor Ireland.
The motion having carried, it will come back to council at our next regular meeting. The motion requires that the mayor identify 5 individuals. So I would invite, well, maybe work the reverse. Is there any councillor who would choose not to be a regular member of PDAC? And I will say that I am happy to sit as an alternate. If there is one other who might be prepared to sit as an alternate, then my choice is easy. Otherwise, I will have to select somebody to sit as an alternate.
For the purposes of the committee, I would also be able to sit as an alternate. Doesn't mean that there won't be a time I'll be perhaps attending a meeting. It's just that we've clearly defined now who are the 5 members.
All right, this will come back to a regular council meeting next week, and I can actually make those appointments at that time. Thank you for that.
Okay, moving on. 7.3, external funding trends and community outreach services capacity. And I see Beth LeBlanc ready to speak to that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Conscrewed and members of council. I'm here this afternoon to present a report on external funding trends that are affecting community outreach services. You have the report in front of you. Administration is recommending that committee receive this report for information and direct administration to report back on options to maintain community social services levels as part of the 2027 budget deliberations. This report also outlines alternatives for committee consideration. Community outreach services is funded through a combination of municipal and external funding sources. In fact, approximately 87% of outreach services are funded through external funding agreements and grants. Several of these funders are listed on page 1 of the report. Over the past several months, we have been advised by multiple funders of funding reductions. While funding opportunities continue to exist, the overall level of support available is declining. The Family and Community Support Services Association of Alberta, FCSSAA, has also identified flat or declining funding as a growing challenge across the province. Municipalities are being asked to respond to increasing and changing community needs with fewer available resources. As funding decreases, pressure increases on our team to identify and secure alternative revenue sources. Maintaining external funding agreements requires significant ongoing efforts, including researching opportunities, preparing applications, measuring outcomes, meeting reporting requirements, and maintaining relationships with funders. On page 2 of the report, you'll find a table outlining 3 major funders that have already announced reductions. The cumulative impact represents a significant decrease to our operating budget for costs. In the immediate term, administration is working to mitigate these impacts through the reallocation of existing resources and by pursuing additional funding opportunities. However, pressures have continued to increase in 2026 and are expected to continue through 2029. If alternative funding sources cannot be secured, potential impacts could include reduced service levels, lower program capacity, changes to service delivery models, staffing reductions, or fewer programs and supports available to our community. Historically, fund development for costs was supported through a dedicated director-level capacity. And since the combining of Community and Family Services and Culture and Recreation departments, reporting and compliance requirements have also increased. Together, these changes have limited the ability to consistently pursue funding opportunities. Many funders now require more detailed reporting, revised outcome measurement approaches, and participation in new data management systems. Combined with anticipated funding reductions, these factors create a growing risk to our services and sustainability. This issue directly relates to 7 of Council's strategic priorities listed in the report on page 2. This topic has particular relevance to our commitments to inclusion. The services delivered through community outreach services are often directed towards our community's most vulnerable and marginalized residents. And while we are currently managing these pressures through internal adjustments, there is a very real possibility that ongoing funding reductions will eventually affect service levels if no additional funding opportunities are identified. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Beth, and to you, Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Conskrud, through you to the Director. You've got for 2026-27 a reduction of 124,000. How does that compare to the entire budget? What is your budget for that year?
I don't have that information in front of me right now. There's a variety of budgets under the community development banner that also contribute to that. So I could get the information and send it out to council.
Do you have a rough idea? Is this like a 10% or 50% or what is it?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud, and through you to Ms. LeBlanc. In the chart, I see in the first year, the FRN, Children's Services, there's a one-time reduction. Does that mean that's the end of that program? Or is there still money, but with no further reduction? Or will the following years, will it be reinstated? I don't understand the blank spaces.
So through you, Deputy Mayor Conskrud, to Councillor Melnick, that is just for the contract for this year. We're waiting on confirmation for the rest.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Consrud, and thank you, Ms. LeBlanc, for the report. I'm wondering, is it your admin's assessment that the challenge is mostly a reduction in funding, or is it that, like, what I'm kind of reading is that since the merger of the two departments, is there just a lot like less capacity to be going out and applying for these grants? Is it, or a combination of both?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Conskrud, to Councillor Waxer, I definitely agree with that statement. It's a combination of both.
If I may, I'm wondering is there somebody in the department dedicated to grant applications? I'm wondering how much time the director spends on that. I would imagine, there's a lot to kind of read into, but I'm just curious if it's strict, capacity. There was a department merger and I understand that.
Deputy Mayor Consrud, maybe I'll just jump in and Beth can clarify, but I think the two separate issues. So department capacity, Beth is best positioned to speak to that, absolutely. And the nearly, just over $400,000 of reductions is these, to my understanding, are just government announced reductions. They said that they're, no matter if we're really, really good at applying for grants, we probably would still be subject to these. So the governments and again, I'm saying governments because you see that it's Alberta, Canada, and then Healthy Aging Alberta, which is somewhat separate. But government funding for social services from the provincial and federal governments is declining. Jasper's not immune to that. And even if we were very, very good at getting grants, maybe we could fill some of those gaps. It would take more administrative capacity for sure. But this is a trend that is happening that all municipalities are facing. So on that one side and the table that's in there, I don't know, and maybe Beth would correct me, but I don't know that additional administrative capacity would have solved that. And the landscape has higher demands in terms of reporting and accountability that's just grown over time. And obviously there's less funds to go around if we want to try to be able to support the level of social services that we have in Jasper. And so that takes more administrative work to try to make ends meet. Beth, anything else that you want to add?
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I just wanted to make a comment that shortly after the fire and conversations with the Red Cross, they made the comment that they had never been in a community with as robust and social services or social support systems. And I think that when we having just returned from FCM, when we heard huge conversations from other municipalities around homelessness and food security, there is a testament to the community outreach services for making a significant impact in keeping our homelessness, the homelessness issue in Jasper at bay, and also the food security. And I think it relates also to our conversations earlier, the presentation from the Verum Consulting, that the importance and value of having the systems in place along with recreation options and things like that. It's what makes this community run well. So I think this is a very worrying situation, and I think it is also evidence of ongoing downloading from other levels of government to the municipal level, in order to keep our each and every municipality a safe and comfortable place to live.
Thanks for that, Councillor Waxer. Looking around, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cosgrove, through you to Ms. LeBlanc. I am just attempting to rationalize the second part of the recommendation with the last paragraph in the briefing note right before strategic relevance. And it appears to be sort of an either or, at least in the text, but the recommendation appears to me to presuppose that we will find options to continue services, not cut them. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that we might have to cut them if we can't afford. And so I recognize the importance of that final paragraph, but it's not reflected as I see it in the recommendation. And so does that suggest that administration is already recommending that we, if necessary, increase our funding, but in no event do we diminish our services?
CEO Given.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Congsreed. I'll speak to that one. So administration is recommending that the service levels are generally appropriate for the community until council decides that they're not. And so our default starting point would be to say that this is the established level of services. Here's the implications of maintaining that service. And council, you can decide if that provides enough value to the community. So I don't think administration sees it as our position to say you should or shouldn't cut services. What we would come forward with is in order to maintain the current service level, here's what would be required. We could also provide alternatives of what different service levels would look like, but ultimately the judgment about whether to maintain, to increase or decrease service levels is a council decision. So if the framing there makes it suggested that sort of seem as though there would only be a recommendation to maintain, I think the recommendation to maintain may show the cost of maintaining, and council would have an understanding of reductions that might be required if you chose to go that direction. So Mayor Ireland, I guess fair enough if council administration completely understands that it's a council level decision about service levels. We would bring forward clear and transparent information to you about what it would mean to maintain current service levels. And if there was a cost to that, it would be up to council to decide whether that cost was worthwhile.
All right. Thank you for that. At the end of the day, I think that's council will have to consider that. I was just trying to understand the written recommendation against that final sentence or the final paragraph. Thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consgood. If you change the word maintain to deliver, would that not be more appropriate?
Deputy Mayor Kongsrud for Councillor Roger. I think probably not quite in the way that motion's written. If council wanted to direct administration, so for example, council could direct administration to come forward with a report on options to match community social service levels with available funding. The implication there would be available funding is going down, and so therefore service levels would be going down. The way that this motion is written is the report would say, in order to maintain Jasper's current standard and service delivery, here's what the cost of that is, or here are the options to maintain that service level. And I should be clear that it's not, obviously, if there's less money to go around, there's going to be some portion of cost, but there may be other alternatives that I'm not thinking of right now. Council could have a starting point that says, administration, go away and figure out how to make our service match available funding. That's a bit of a different starting point, to be clear. But Councillor Roger, I don't think just the simple change of that one word would quite get at that.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consgood, through you to administration generally, and just picking up on Councillor Waxer's observation about downloading, which seems pretty apparent, and about the fact that the Red Cross has recognized that Jasper is perhaps ahead of the scale in the services that we have delivered to date, at least. To what extent is the municipality already delivering services that should be, and perhaps in other communities are, delivered by provincial agencies? Can we speak to that? So yes, our municipality is doing more than most, but maybe that's because other communities in fact have a provincial or a federal agency embedded within the community that is already delivering those services, and we are left without. So we wind up providing services for other orders of government.
Ms. Melanchek had something to say, but as well, you can go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to, I did some calculations back to Councillor Rogers' question about the budget. And currently that area in the budget is budgeted at expenses of 1.5 million. The municipal assistance on that area is 150,000.
Okay, thank you. So it's really only less than 10% of a reduction in the total numbers then. That gives us a better idea of what sort of reduction we're looking at.
CAO given.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud, to come back to the previous question, if council had an interest in comparing the basket of services or the level of services that the municipality offers to other communities, that might be an additional thing that you could ask us to do. I'm a bit mindful of the fact that every additional sort of angle of analysis that you might ask us to do is, we're talking about administrative capacity, would be a draw on that administrative capacity, but it is a worthwhile, maybe council may decide it's a worthwhile piece of information to have to say, okay, how did Jasper's suite of social services compare to other municipalities? And importantly, why do our services look the way they do? And it could be because there's no other agency available to offer the services. We have this really unique strategy of bringing together smaller pots of money to deliver more than, it'd be hard for any agency to hire a 0.25, a quarter-time position in Jasper. But if we pool that quarter-time funding from one agency with quarter-time from another, or quarter-time from another, all of a sudden you have a full-time position. This council hasn't really seen all that type of information. And I'm not sure when the last time Jasper sort of looked at how we do things compared to others is. That I don't know that I've seen that in my time. that wouldn't necessarily be a small piece of work. Just to be really clear and to acknowledge what the team would have to do. But if council wanted to do that, that isn't necessarily included in this motion here. If that's something additionally you want us to do, I'd suggest that you should specify it.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you. I won't go there quite yet, but thank you. But if I could just return to Director Melanchuk's numbers. You said $1.5 million is the budgeted amount for this sort of work. And so Councillor Roger indicated, so this is about a 10% reduction. It's a 10% reduction in the overall budget, but I take it then 2 years out, it would be a doubling of the municipal contribution. We're at about 150,000 now, and we're going to lose 120,000 next year and 164 after that. So to maintain services at the current budget, and that is flat, and costs are going up. So flat is already a reduction, but we would be looking at doubling the municipal contribution. Is that what I heard from your answer?
Your worship, that's a good reflection on the amount. So right now, $150,000 of municipal tax dollars goes towards those programs. And then, yes, the other amounts are what you would be reflecting on going forward. And obviously, yes, we would have to look at what those expenses are in the future as well.
Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. And one comment that I wanted to make is when the Red Cross was speaking about the value of the services here, they were really speaking to the cohesive one-stop shop type of service that's available here, and that has been carefully crafted over the years to create a strong safety net. So built out of the same funding that every other community would receive, but would receive would be offered to the community in a more fragmented way. And the other comment is, I may be speaking out of turn, but as the board member of Family and Community Support Services Association, one part of the 150,000 that is in the municipal budget is part of the municipal contribution that goes back 50 years of the 80-20 FCSS, for the 80-20 split for FCSS. Am I correct in that? Approximately. Anyway, yeah.
Thanks for all that. Does anybody care to make a motion? Oh, question to Council.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I'm going to go back to but I just want to understand, is the department actively looking for and pursuing new funding opportunities, or what I'm getting is the capacity is just not there and all you can really do is focus on maintaining existing agreements? And I just ask that again because I look at the amount of reductions, amount that we're going to have to contribute. I wonder if a part-time position would, like it's 125 this year, 120 next, 165 over time, if there was a position that was mostly dedicated to that. Because what I'm reading and think I'm understanding is that capacity is just not there. You're too busy maintaining what you have and reports and all the things. And with the recovery of the wildfire, I think there's a lot on the plates of the staff at Outreach Services. I wonder if that might come to us in a report at budget time, bringing on somebody who is just dedicated to finding funding. And I mean, I know funding is being cut from all levels of government, but are there other grants? There must be other grants and opportunities out there that maybe we just don't see because we're just too busy maintaining.
through you, Deputy Mayor Consecrude, to Councillor Hall. I definitely agree with that statement, and I do think that the capacity has decreased over time to look for other grants, and it's something that we're continuing to try and do, but there's less and less time available.
Here's as though there's no more discussion. Would anybody care to make a motion? Councillor Waxer.
That committee receive this report for information, and that committee direct administration to report on options to maintain community social service levels as part of the 2027 budget deliberations.
I'll ask the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. It's passed. And then saying that, it is 12:30. I don't know if the councillors, thanks, Beth, Miss Blank. The councillors want to take a lunch. I know one of us has to leave us, so it's his opportunity perhaps if we take lunch, or would you like to continue on? Okay, it's we'll take a half an hour break. Throw me a bone here, people. Okay, 1 hour. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Thanks. Welcome back to June 9th Committee of the Whole meeting. We have Director Melanchek discussing Regional Assessment Review Board appointments.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good afternoon. Today, the recommendation is to appoint Melissa DeLorme from the town of Hinton as the designated chair and Lila Moselle from the town of Hinton as the designated chair. The first, Melissa DeLorme, is designated clerk, and Lila Moselle as designated chair of the Regional Assessment Review Board for West Yellowhead for a one-year term beginning June 16, 2026. Under the Municipal Government Act, municipalities are required to establish assessment review boards. Jasper participates in a regional model with the Town of Hinton, Town of Edson, and Improvement District number 12 through Regional Assessment Review Board Bylaw 245. This bylaw was adopted by Council in May of 2022. Under sections 454 of the Municipal Government Act, a council must establish a local assessment review board and a composite assessment review board. Under 455 of the Municipal Government Act, 2 or more councils may agree to jointly establish a LARB and CARB to have jurisdiction in their municipalities as a regional assessment review board. The designated chair and the designated clerk positions rotate among partner municipalities to support shared responsibility and regional collaboration. The designated clerk coordinates assessment appeal hearings across the region, while local clerks continue to manage hearing notices, documentation, and legislative requirements within their own municipalities. The designated clerk coordinates assessment appeal hearings across the region, while local clerks continue to manage hearing notices, documentation, and legislative requirements. The senior finance assistant for the municipality, acts as the Jasper Locals Assessment Review Board clerk, and Councillor Hall acts as Jasper's Assessment Review Board member. Jasper has provided the designated clerk for 2024. Edson provided the clerk for 2025, and Hinton is providing the clerk and member this year. If Hinton or Edson has complaints that go to hearing, Councillor Hall could be called upon to be a board member present at the hearing. Because Jasper did have some complaint process this year, Jasper's 26th assessment complaint deadline was passed. and all assessment complaints have been resolved since. However, appointments are still required to maintain the regional board structure and comply with bylaw. These appointments support effective governance and regional partnerships and high quality decision-making processes. A final note, there are no significant financial impacts associated with these appointments as hearing costs continue to be borne by the municipality where the assessed property is located. That's a quick summary of the requests for council today, and I'm available should there be any questions.
Thanks for that, Director Melanchik. Any questions or concerns from council? Anybody care to make a motion? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I make the recommendation that committee recommend council appoint Melissa Delorme from the town of Hinton as the designated clerk for the Regional Assessment Review Board for West Yellowhead for a one-year term starting June 16th, 2026. And that committee recommend council appoint Lila Moselle from the town of Hinton as the designated chair for the Regional Assessment Board for West Yellowhead for a one-year term, also starting on June 16th, 2026.
Thanks for that motion. Any discussion, or shall I call the question? All those in favor? It's unanimous, passed. And moving on, 7.5, information technology acceptable use policy. That will be with, oh, go ahead, CAO Given.
Great. Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Consrud. I'm here today and joined by our Information Technology Coordinator, Joe Campbell. We're bringing forward a acceptable use policy for Council's consideration, or for committee's consideration today. By way of background, in 2024, the Council of the Day adopted an Information Technology Master Plan for our community. The Master Plan gave a roadmap for how the municipality could strengthen its IT processes and procedures and governance. And it also looked at our existing systems and what we had in place. The plan identified some significant gaps in how we govern and control the use of IT. And the plan recommended the development of an acceptable use policy as a phase 1 priority. Obviously, after April of 2024, other events took a bit higher priority than IT policy. That said, Joe has helped continue us moving forward through the wildfire, and we're now ready to bring forward this policy, which was one of the recommendations from the master plan. I know Council had the package. Maybe I'll just provide a little bit of an overview of the policy and point Council's attention to a couple key things. Broadly, the policy establishes the consistent expectations for employees, contractors, volunteers, and elected officials, and I'll return to that, on basically anyone who accesses municipal IT infrastructure or resources, computers or systems, and it is intended to support professional conduct, responsible stewardship of our municipal assets, and awareness of legislated obligations related to records management, privacy, and information access. So all of those things are wrapped up in this policy. The policy also identifies the establishment of a IT steering committee, which was another recommendation from the master plan, is that there should be one body within municipal administration that provides leadership with respect to IT work. And so we have established that committee. We've identified the senior leadership team, which is myself, the directors, and HR and communications. So we meet regularly anyhow, and rather than establishing another committee within administration, we identified that the SLT could work as that steering committee. So the policy identifies that the steering committee that we will have a steering committee, and it also identifies some of the roles of the steering committee. The policy covers a number of broad areas, including governance and security alignment, stewardship and professional conduct, and implementation of the policy and continuous improvement. The thing that I want to bring Council's attention to is that you are also within this policy. Many of you have municipally issued electronic devices. You access the municipal email system. And so the things that would arise out of this policy or out of our IT processes and procedures and practices would apply to you as well. And that may come down to opportunities for training or requirements for training around security training. And so the obligations and expectations that are spelled out for users also means you. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the policy. Just to reiterate, this was a recommendation from our IT master plan. It is a step in demonstrating that there's a consistent approach to how we govern the use of our IT resources. And Joe is here to be able to answer any technical questions that council may have. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about the policy or take any comment.
Thanks for that, CEO Givens. And looking to council for any questions or concerns, discussion. Seeing none, I would like, oh, go ahead, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Consgard. I am at a bit of a loss, really, as to understand the rules that should govern the use. There's a lot of somewhat vague references that we should use devices in accordance with municipal procedures and data governance requirements, that usage should be in compliance with governance structures, policies, and municipal insurance requirements. But those are not detailed. So for us to be in compliance, are we waiting to hear the rules? Should we go out and search the rules? How do we know what the appropriate conduct is when it's so generally phrased?
Thanks very much, Mayor Ireland. So with the council policy, it is intentionally high level. Those details would either come under an administrative procedure, which may be an outcome of this, or municipal programs. So we have training resources that we highlight. We, from time to time, issue directives to the rest of the organization about how to use devices, or Joe will implement a new security measure that users have to adapt to. So those things would be ongoing. So there isn't one single list of them. It evolves over time. And many requirements for the use of technology overlap different legislation. So things like freedom of information, protection of privacy legislation, those have implications for our technology use. And anything that would impact users or council would come directly to you for your notice. So the policy is intentionally high level. I won't say vague, I will say high level, because it's intended to be all encompassing, recognizing that there's a lot of territory to cover. It does set the framework for who internally within administration guides the programs and procedures that would follow. That's the IT steering committee. And then it's up to Joe and the rest of administration to inform the users when there's a change that affects them.
Right now, the policy, if it was to be approved, requires, there's a statement under 3.2, ensure that any personal use of municipal IT assets is incidental, infrequent, and does not interfere with municipal service delivery. So those words in particular, incidental and infrequent, is a councillor able to have a Facebook page on a municipal device? I'm not there. I don't operate in that world, but it seems to me that it's a lot more than infrequent for some people.
Mayor Ireland, I think we would have to look on a case-by-case basis. There's some situations where, and certainly elected officials might be a little bit of a different class. I think we'd say for a municipal employee, we would be on the lower end of that spectrum of tolerance for it. For an elected official who's using social media as a way to communicate with their constituents, that would obviously be, I think, an acceptable use. There may be some different cases. So again, there's some subjectivity and the difference of how council might be, where council might land in some of those scales would be different than members of administration.
So can we over time expect additional clarity specifically with respect to council? I'm happy to hear from anybody, but I noticed one of the early policy statements was about security, and I absolutely agree our system should be secure. And I fear that it would be easy for me to inadvertently breach security. And I'd like to know how to avoid that. But the policy tells me I should ensure that it shouldn't happen, but it doesn't give me guidance on how I can take steps to make sure it doesn't happen.
I would say for any type of Facebook, anything you're unsure of, reach out to IT. We would be able to answer, ensure you're using it according to any standards we may have established. Generally speaking, acceptable use is a very vague policy. It's more meant as a standard to move forward with other governance, and it prevents a lot of that standard language from showing up over and over again in other policy.
All right, thank you.
Appears as though there's no other questions. Is anybody ready to make a motion? Councillor Frechette.
That committee recommend council approve the information technology acceptable use policy as presented.
Thanks for that. You have a question, Councillor Hall? Okay.
I am in support of this motion, and I also wanted to thank you, Joe, for all the work you do. I believe it feels like it's behind the scenes a lot because IT isn't often very visible. But I think it's becoming really important with like cybersecurity threats and data protection. Now AI, which was a big conversation at our federal conference this week. Having somebody keeping an eye on everything is very valuable. So thank you very much.
Any other comments, or should I call to the question? All in favor? That's unanimous. It's passed. Thanks, and thank you, Joe, Mr. Campbell. And now the motion action list. CEO Given will speak to that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. I think everything on the list is in order. There's one item that we wanted to recommend could be adjusted. That's at the bottom of page 1, lot GHG development. That was sort of a two-part motion. The first part was related to administration bringing forward a borrowing bylaw to recover some of the costs, That bylaw has been given first reading by council, so it's in process. So we're recommending that first motion could be removed from the list. There is still a discussion to be had about administration identifying approaches to recoup costs, including interest. And so that will come at a later date. But for now, we're suggesting that the first part of that motion could be removed, and that's the only update that we're recommending to the list at this time.
Thanks for that. Any concerns, questions, comments for CEO Given? To you, Councillor Waxer.
I'm happy to make the motion that committee approve the updated motion action list.
Thanks for that. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. It's passed. Now we're going to councillor upcoming meetings, council appointments to boards and committees. Or I guess take it as it is. Councillor Frechette.
Yes, I will be attending the last of the season's early childhood conversations tomorrow, June 10th. prior to the summer break.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. I will be attending a Recovery Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday. Also on Thursday, although it's not one of my appointments, but I'll be taking part in a focus group with the Climate Caucus on mis and disinformation around climate change. And Monday morning, I will be zooming into a Yellowhead Regional Library board meeting.
Last Wednesday, I attended last adult and senior conversations for the summer. It'll be shutting down. It was really interesting, and they will be coming out with the report and sending it to council. Councillor Rogers.
Later this month, myself and yourself actually will be attending the monthly directors meeting of the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, and we'll give you an update. The building is coming along, I understand. And I'll also be flipping pancakes July 1st.
Thanks for that. So I think I covered those 2 points. One fell swoop. Upcoming events, we got the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce AGM, June 11th. Community Summer Celebration, June 14th, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. National Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st, at the Commemoration Park. And there's a diploma ceremony for École des Rochers graduates on June 22nd at 1:30. And on that, I knew there was. Then the Jasper Junior Senior High School graduation, June 25th at 1 p.m. And we will be missing a council meeting on June 30th because it's the 5th Tuesday of the month. And like Councillor Rogers stated, we'll all be there with our red and white flipping pancakes, July 1st, Commemoration Park. And to you, Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kongsrud. And just for myself, I will not miss the no council meeting on the 30th. I'll be happy to have that day off in preparation for July 1st. And I just wanted to alert council that councillors will have an opportunity once again to ride in a carriage on Canada Day if they wish to do so. I think last year a few councillors did that and handed out candies or freezies that weren't frozen to kids along the route. So we have an opportunity again to get a carriage to ride in. So if there are councillors who are interested, you'll have to let me know. The sooner the better, and I can make sure that there is a carriage big enough for all the councillors who want to hand out goodies to kids.
Thanks for that. And anybody else like to make any other motions? Mayor Ireland. Thanks for that. All in favor? Unanimous? Passed? Thank you.